In this video, I'm going to try and give you a quick and easy guide to Mandarin pronunciation. Specifically, we're talking about pinyin here, which is the most commonly used romanization scheme for Chinese, Mandarin Chinese. Romanization just means that this is how we take another language and write it using the Latin alphabet, which is the alphabet that English uses. Before we get into it, there are a few caveats here that I want to share to contextualize everything you're about to see. I don't think this has ever been done before. What I mean is that most pinyin pronunciation guides that you see out there will go pretty granularly, and they're intended for people who are trying to learn the language. Instead, I am making this video for people who just want to know how not to mangle Chinese words. For instance, if you are just pronouncing the name of a famous place in China, or a famous person, a historical or current political figure, or a classmate or teacher. I feel like Chinese names can be pretty hard to pronounce, and I feel like there isn't a guide for people who don't want to spend the time learning the entire pronunciation scheme for this foreign language. I don't feel like there's a guide for people who have a casual interest in just being able to say the names or words relatively accurately. However, the more I researched this video, the more I understood why that's the case. Because it's very hard to create this sort of thing. Pinyin and Chinese pronunciation in general, but pinyin is modeled off of a system basically using initials and finals. That might sound complicated, but it's really not. What that means is that the sounds of a word are thought of as having, a beginning and an end. For instance, you might have a word like lin, right? L-I-N, which is just le, in, lin. When Chinese teachers teach pronunciation, they often teach it this way, right? So le would be the initial, in would be the final. That sounds kind of simple and straightforward, but if you take a more complex final, like yang, right? For instance, le, yang, liang, the I-A-N-G are all kind of one unit. So what I'm trying to do in this video is to give you a general guide for how to pronounce vowels in general, and not those discrete chunks. Because I feel like if I'm doing those chunks, an I-A-N-G, then I'm basically just asking you to go and learn Chinese pronunciation completely. Instead, what I want to do is just a kind of quick and dirty pronunciation guide where you can kind of just think about the vowels as having a certain sound with a few exceptions, and kind of sound things out the way that you do in English. Although I should say English is also not very phonetic, right? Things sound different in different places, right? You can't rely on a vowel to always sound the same way, which is, part of the problem that we're having with pinyin, with trying to have a simple guide. A couple other points. Pinyin is not Wade-Giles, which is another romanization system that you might see used in Taiwan. And what we're going to be doing in this video is basically relying on our English language intuition with diphthongs, which are not a G string that you wear to go swimming, but the combination sound of two vowels next to each other that kind of melt together. We have these in English. You'll know what I'm talking about as soon as you hear it, even if you're not familiar with the word diphthong, which is a kind of technical linguistic term. All right, let's start. The base rules are Spanish pronunciation, which is pretty easy and pretty predictable. And if you haven't learned Spanish, that's not a big deal. It's just a, e, I, o, u, right? Those are the sounds that a, e, I, o, u make, right? So you can just imagine for any time you see those vowels, they are going to sound like a, e, o, u. And then we will get to the several exceptions that we have to deal with. All right. First set of exceptions is Pinyin, unfortunately, has contractions in it. These were just introduced by the linguists, the Chinese linguists who made Pinyin in order to make it quicker for Chinese people to write. This system, Pinyin, was not created for language learners. It was created for Chinese people. So cutting out a letter here and there means that billions of people across China can write faster every day. Practical for them, confusing for language learners. There's two, arguably three of these. I'm just going to talk about two, and then I'll maybe mention the third at the end of the video. The two are just UI and IU. So that's pretty easy to remember because it's the same two vowels, just reversed. UI is pronounced as if it were written U-E-I. So it's ue, right? So you can take a word like dui in Chinese, which means correct or right, right? Like if you answer a question correctly, your teacher might say dui. Right? This sounds like the dui in Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, right? That famous wrestler and maybe presidential candidate someday, who knows? Okay, so that's ue. I-E, it's not ui, it's ue, because there's an invisible E in between those two vowels. It's U-E-I is how this would actually be spelled if it was spelled phonetically or in a more straightforward way. I-U is pronounced as if it is I-O-U. So maybe a little memory device could be I-O-U, an extra letter, because we cut out the O in the middle. This sound is just EO, EO. So Leo, right? Like the astrological sign, Leo the lion. If you see L-I-U, that is a very common Chinese last name. That is pronounced Leo. In the case of someone like Lucy Liu, I regret to inform you, we've all been mispronouncing her name for years, but that's fine, right? Lucy Liu sounds great, and she's had plenty of success. That's been a really nice, easy name for people to pronounce, so I think we're all okay with that, and I think she's probably used to it being mispronounced at this point. I think she's incorporated that into her entire, celebrity presence or identity. Okay. Those are the contractions. Next, we have bad spellings with the letter A. These things you just kind of have to memorize. Any word that ends with I-A-N, you should just mentally switch the A with an E. It's going to be pronounced Tien, Lien, Nien. It's annoying. I wish they just spelled it with an E. There's other systems that spell this sound with an E. For instance, if you look up the character Tien from Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z, if you watch that show, on his Wikipedia page you'll see it written as T-I-E-N, but this is the same T-I-A-N that's written in Pinyin. He's actually based off of a Chinese character from Journey West, which is a hugely important cultural piece. It's one of like the 4 great works of Chinese literature, and it's actually what all of Dragon Ball Z or Dragon Ball is loosely based off of. Goku has a monkey's tail, and he's kind of the Monkey King from Journey West. That's a little cultural aside. Okay. The other bad spelling with A is just 4 letters, which is annoying because you can't just remember it as an ending sound. It's only with these 4 letters end this ending sound, right? So Y, J, Q, and X, if they are followed by a U-A-N, this, again, the A, mentally just switch that to an E. It is yuan, juan, chuan, xuan. If someone talks about Chinese yuan, they are mispronouncing the name of Chinese currency. It's yuan. I understand the mispronunciation, I empathize, but that's wrong. This is, as I was saying, it's only with these 4 letters, so if you see D-U-A-N, or T-U-A-N, or L-U-A-N, it is going to be that ah sound. Very annoying, right? So it would still be duan, tuan, luan. Maybe a way that you can remember this is that Y, J, Q, and X are all kind of annoying consonant sounds. J, Q, and X, those sounds, the way they're pronounced in Pinyin, do not exist in English. So those are just difficult already, and then you add this complexity or this annoying little rule with the UAN words. Y is also annoying because sometimes it's a vowel and sometimes it's a consonant, right? A, E, I, O, U, and sometimes Y. So these are kind of just 4 annoying consonants. Okay, next, E. I said before, right, we're using Spanish pronunciation. A, E, I, O, U. The exception with E is if we go with just an E ending, an EN, or an ENG. We're basically switching from Spanish to French. It's not anymore, it's right? So like duh, gun, tongue, those are actually all sounds in Chinese. Next, we have the letter I. If it's followed by an N immediately after the I, so like IN, like bin, or ING, like bing, just pronounce it how you think. It's bin, bing, right? It just kind of sounds like English there. You're gonna lose the long E sound and it'll be I, right? That's kind of intuitive, so that's not too bad. The complicating ones are if it comes after a Z, C, or S, or a ZH, a CH, or SH. And I realize now that I probably should have included R in there, but I'm trying to keep this simple. For Z, C, and S, this is going to sound very similar to that sound we just described with E. It's just going to be, your mouth is closed a little bit more. So it's going to be C, C, S. With the ZH, CH, and SH, this is actually kind of easy because we have these in English. If you can say gerbil, church, and sure, you already have it, right? ZH is jur, CH is chur, SHI is sure. Yeah. Before I was saying I forgot to include R. It would be above, right? Because there's no H after it. It would be with the Z, C, S sounds, right? This would be like, excuse me. This would be with the ZH, CH, and SHI sounds. It's like R. So it's basically just that ending sound for those 3. Okay, finally, we're almost there, I promise. Finally, if a word ends with UO or O, You basically pronounce this like your adorable Jewish mom saying, "That's just awful, honey. Aw, awful." Yeah. We actually kind of have this sound in English, although it took me a little searching to realize if you take words like poor, tour, or tourist and cut off before you get to the R. Poor, tor. Maybe make it sound a little bit more like Bernie Sanders, right? Poor, tor, tourist. Right, that's basically the sound here for a UO or an O. This was kind of the contraction that I didn't mention before. You can basically think of an O as being a contraction of a UO, but some Chinese teachers might disagree with me. Some other people might agree. Like the guy who writes Hacking Chinese has an article about this, or he makes this point in one of his articles about Chinese pronunciation. And lastly, if you have OU, those two vowels together just return to our long O sound. So, do, lo, cho. And that's it. Isn't that so simple, guys? So easy to understand. This, as I've been making this has kind of felt increasingly like a joke, because the point was to make something simple, and I feel like I took a system that is not terribly complex and maybe arguably made it more complex. Maybe less so. I do think that this guide that I've just shared with you is maybe more straightforward and simple for language learners, or not language learners, for lay people who aren't really trying to learn the entire language of Chinese and just want to know some, like, how to pronounce basically, like, close enough that it doesn't sound like embarrassingly wrong. But I don't know, I think when you hear this number of like rules and exceptions, it might sound a little overwhelming. But at the end of the day, I don't think it's too bad. And anyway, I've been working on this week, and I just want to finish because I can't tell if this is actually going to be helpful for people, so might as well just finish it, put it online, and see what you guys think. All right.